The living room looked like something out of a glossy magazine: polished marble floors, velvet sofas, and tall windows that poured in afternoon light. Laughter drifted through the air as well-dressed guests sipped champagne and admired the decor. In the middle of it all stood the elderly woman, her back slightly bent, her hands wrapped tightly around a silver tray loaded with crystal glasses filled to the brim. The tray felt heavier with every passing second. Her arms ached deeply, the kind of pain that started in the muscles and crept into the bones. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, afraid that if she moved too much, the glasses would tip. Years ago, these same arms had carried her son to bed after long days, had scrubbed floors and stitched torn clothes so he could go to school looking neat. Now, they trembled in silence. Across the room, her son's fiancée, Clara, reclined comfortably on a cream-colored sofa. Her designer heels lay discarded on the floor beside her, and her phone glowed softly in her manicured hand. She laughed at something on the screen, utterly detached from the struggle unfolding just a few steps away. The old woman cleared her throat softly, not wanting to disturb anyone. "Clara," she said, her voice barely rising above a whisper. When Clara didn't respond, she tried again, a little louder. "My dear, my arms are tired." Clara glanced up slowly, as if annoyed by an interruption. Her eyes traveled from the woman's shaking hands to the tray, then back to her face. "Already," she said with a faint smirk. "The guests haven't even finished their drinks." The elderly woman swallowed hard. "I don't want to drop anything," she murmured. "May I please put it down?" Clara sighed and leaned back against the cushions. "Just hold on a bit longer," she replied coldly. "If you want people to respect you here, you should at least try to be helpful." The words struck harder than the weight of the tray. The woman lowered her gaze, nodding obediently. Her fingers tightened around the edges, even as pain shot through her wrists. No one moved. No one spoke, and in that beautiful room filled with luxury, the loneliness she felt was heavier than anything she carried in her hands. Time seemed to slow, stretching each second into something unbearable. The elderly woman remained standing, her feet planted on the cold marble floor, the tray still balanced in her shaking hands. A dull ache pulsed through her shoulders, spreading down her arms like fire beneath her skin. She tried to steady her breathing, afraid that even a small sigh might cause her hands to tremble more. A faint clink echoed as two of the crystal glasses touched. A few drops of water splashed over the rim and dotted the floor. The sound was soft, but in the quiet elegance of the room, it felt deafening. Clara's head snapped up. "Careful," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the polite chatter. Several guests turned to look. "Do you have any idea how expensive those glasses are?" The old woman's face flushed with shame. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. My hands are weak." She tried to adjust her grip, but her fingers felt numb now, stiff and unresponsive. Clara stood and walked closer, heels clicking against the floor. Instead of taking the tray, she leaned in and whispered harshly, "If you can't handle simple things, you shouldn't insist on being here." The words stung. The elderly woman bit her lip, forcing back tears. She remembered nights of hunger, days of endless work, and the promise she made to herself that her son would never live this way. She had kept that promise, and now she stood humiliated in his mansion, treated like an inconvenience. Around them, the guests pretended not to see. Some stared into their glasses, others looked away, uncomfortable but silent. No one wanted to challenge the future mistress of the house. The tray felt impossibly heavy now. Her wrists throbbed, and her arms began to lower against her will. Panic flickered in her eyes. "Please," she whispered again, voice breaking, "I can't hold it much longer." Clara rolled her eyes dramatically. "You're being so dramatic," she said loudly, ensuring others heard. "Stand properly. You're making a scene." The elderly woman straightened as best she could, though pain shot through her spine. Her vision blurred, chairs finally slipping free and landing on the polished floor below. She felt small, invisible, reduced to nothing more than a pair of trembling hands holding something precious that was never meant to be hers. In that moment, surrounded by luxury and people, she had never felt more alone. The tension in the room had grown thick, pressing down on everyone like an unseen weight. The elderly woman swayed slightly, fighting the dizziness creeping in from her exhausted arms. Her fingers burned, cramped around the edges of the tray, and her breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls. Just as she felt her strength slipping away completely, a sudden sound cut through the silence. The front door opened. The deep click of the lock echoed across the living room, followed by the firm, unmistakable footsteps of someone who commanded attention without saying a word. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every head turned toward the entrance. A tall man stepped inside, his presence filling the room instantly. His tailored suit spoke of wealth and power, but his eyes, dark, alert, searching, revealed something sharper. The millionaire's son had returned early. His gaze swept across the guests, then the decor, until it landed on a sight that made his chest tighten. His mother stood frozen in the center of the room, arms trembling violently, face pale and streaked with tears. For a moment, he didn't breathe. "Mom." His voice was low but carried across the room. At the sound of her son's voice, the elderly woman's strength finally gave out. Her fingers loosened. The tray slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor, crystal shattering into glittering shards. Gasps erupted from the guests. The woman flinched as if struck, instinctively raising her hands in defense. "I'm sorry," she whispered, terror in her eyes. "I didn't mean to drop it." The son rushed forward, kneeling beside her. He barely glanced at the broken glass. His focus was entirely on her shaking hands, red and swollen from strain. "Did someone make you do this?" he asked softly, though his jaw was clenched tight. Before she could answer, Clara stepped forward quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She insisted on helping," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "I told her she didn't have to." The man slowly stood, his expression darkening. He looked from the shattered glass to his mother's trembling form, then back to Clara. The room felt colder. "Helping," he repeated quietly. His voice carried a dangerous calm. "Or being humiliated while everyone watched." No one spoke. Even the chandeliers seemed to glow dimmer as the truth settled heavily in the air. The room remained frozen, the echo of shattered crystal still hanging in the air. The millionaire's son turned away from Clara and knelt beside his mother once more. Carefully, as if she were made of glass, he took her trembling hands in his own. They were cold, swollen, and marked with deep red lines from the weight she had been forced to bear. "Mom, look at me," he said gently. When her eyes finally met his, they filled with tears she had tried so hard to hide. "You never have to stand like this for anyone. Not here. Not anywhere." He helped her to a nearby chair, ignoring the broken glass beneath his shoes. He draped his jacket over her shoulders and wrapped her fingers around a warm glass of water someone had silently placed nearby. Only when he was sure she was steady did he stand and turn back to the room. His gaze locked onto Clara. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" he asked, his voice calm but razor-sharp. Clara's confident posture wavered. "I was just teaching her how things work in a house like this," she said defensively. "She needs to understand boundaries." A murmur rippled through the guests. The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "Boundaries," he repeated. "This woman raised me with nothing. She worked until her hands bled so I could have a future. And you decided she needed to learn her place." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her face drained of color as the weight of every watching eye pressed in on her. "I built this life for my mother," he continued, his voice rising slightly now. "Not so she could be humiliated in it." He took a breath, steady and final. "This engagement is over." Gasps filled the room. Clara stumbled back a step, shaking her head. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," he replied. "Leave, now." Silence followed as Clara gathered her things, her earlier arrogance replaced by disbelief and shame. When the door closed behind her, the man returned to his mother's side. She clutched his hand, tears streaming freely. "I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. He knelt before her, pressing his forehead to her hands. "You are not the trouble," he said softly. "You are the reason I am who I am." For the first time that evening, the elderly woman cried not from pain or humiliation, but from relief, finally seen, finally protected, finally home.